Okay. Welcome back, folks. We're back into the public part of the meeting here, and just before we proceed any further, our director has a statement to make.
Just noting we need to make a correction to the Mangareki lease information where we've said that the previous lease was for $100 or 50% of revenue, which was the greater. That was actually 50% of the profit, not the revenue. Doesn't change anything materially, but just we will make that correction to the paper.
Okay, thank you. Assuming there are no further questions, I'm going to move some recommendations and ask for those to be brought up on the screen because they are different from what was originally in our agendas. Yeah, we'll just make it a bit bigger and we can scroll down. So just noting in item 4, there was just initially an incorrect paragraph numbering because things got changed around a bit in the papers. So that's just the terms of that Maungaraki degree. More substantially though, items 5 and 6, that officers agree to continue work with Rotary to see if a viable proposal for divestment can be put forward for the Gibbs Watson Conservatory. That word respectively doesn't need to be in there, I don't think. In number 5. By the 31st of May 2026, and recommendation 6, agree that officers continue to work with Belmont Resident Association to see if a viable proposal for divestment can be put forward for the Hardwick Smith Lounge by 30 June 2026. In accordance with that, that the committee notes that a viable proposal includes demonstration that organisations taking on divested buildings can manage immediate renewals in a timely manner within 12 months of divestment, ongoing operating costs of an improved asset, future maintenance and renewals, and that as buildings are on reserve land, they will need to be maintained to a level that meets council requirements, just making it very clear what is required by those dates above. And number 8 agrees that if assets are not divested by the agreed dates, they will be demolished as planned. Could I have a seconder for those recommendations, please? Councillor Shaw, thank you. Is there any discussion? I'm sure there is. Anyone? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. I'd like to propose an amendment. Have we seconded this yet? Okay, so I'd like to propose an amendment, and that is to which item? And number 5, to agree to work with officers and continue to work with Rotary, and it's to include the Tuta Kiwi Orchard House in that conversation. The reasons I'd just like a seconder for that amendment.
I second that.
So your amendment is to include and Tuta Kiwi Orchid House after Gibbs Watson Conservatory. Please. And that's been seconded by Councillor Harkin. Would anyone like to discuss that amendment further? Councillor Brown.
We've spent almost all morning talking on this and getting to, this is one of the hard decision places we're in. We are meant to be in a process of divesting, and now we've added one back in. So I don't support that. But also I thought the 31st of May I thought we were going to make that shorter because I've had 2.5 years. Why are we going out to 31st of May and not just making that necessary decision either way now?
I believe someone misspoke when they said 31st of March earlier in the meeting. The email that was circulated to us from Rotary requested that date of 31st of May that's up there. I understand that Alan's unavailable through the rest of March. It still allows us to proceed with demolition in our timeframes if possible. That's why it says 31st of May.
Yep, okay. I don't support the motion, but okay with the 31st of May.
We are speaking just to the amendment at this stage, folks, which is to include Tuta Kiwi Orchid House in recommendation 5 up there. Councillor Puketapu.
I'm just thinking about, today we had the Belmont Association come, the Resident Association, and we've had the Rotary attend, and the Tutakiwi Orchard House, from my perspective, is something that is quite new about bringing onto the table today. Don't know anything about the background of this, but also not sure about whether or not the fact that it has been a while, but also that they're not here today, that this has been put on the table by one of our councillors. There is no knowledge about this from my perspective, so I don't support that. It doesn't feel like a good process to be following, and potentially sets a precedent for how we move forward in regards to how other assets that have already been indicated for demolition are re-put back onto the table.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, I'm happy to support the amendment. It sounds like from officers that this building isn't going to get demolished anyway, because it's being done as a pack. So if we're giving the conservatory till end of May, then it really makes no difference whether we say you've got a couple of weeks, months to come to us with a plan for that. So I'm happy to support the amendment, but everything else still sticks. It's still got to be able to get out of the box.
Anyone else like to comment on this amendment? Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. I've seconded this amendment because I think there's been a breakdown in communication somewhere along the line. And this is, while I totally agree with Deputy Mayor Brown's point, we are trying to divest council's assets. This is still part of the divestment process. It still can be done. It still needs to meet all of those requirements. And it is not inducing any further delay. So while I acknowledge Councillor Puketapu's issue with this is new on the agenda, it is and it isn't. It is part of the conversation that has been had with this group, and the conservatory and Tutakiwi came to council together. The extension was granted in a piecemeal way because it was the one that felt that the group felt that they could pick up. We did not go back out to the community particularly efficiently to see and double check that had happened. Obviously, those conversations did happen within the community, and the Arts Trust has picked that up as a potential solution to this. I totally understand the fact that we are trying to reduce our assets down, but if the proposal that is on the table meets the idea that it actually reduces the asset demand, produces a stable long-term structure that doesn't need very much maintenance, and adds to our community and preserves part of our heritage, it meets all of those criteria. Sure, it's not hit all of the timelines that we could have done in terms of good decision making, but I think that all of these possibly could have been a separate paper and clearly indicated to communities. This is a hard conversation. We keep sliding things in. I have to say that officers did a really good job with the consultation with Mangaraki, which is part of this, the wider proposal. We need to continue to work with our community to reach the best outcomes, and the process is difficult.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not prepared to support the amendment on the grounds that we've not heard, we've spent all morning talking about two very contentious issues. We've not heard from the Arts Trust at all. We don't even know what they're planning to put in place for this. It would have been great if somebody could have spoken on this from their organisation, but I just think it's, you know, almost like the 11th hour, and we haven't heard a thing. Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
I do support the amendment for the Etu Arts Trust. It appears that there's been a bit of a miscommunication, so on that basis, with a tight time frame, I'm happy to support it.
I'm going to put that amendment to the vote now. All those in favour of the amendment and the amendment only? Aye. Oh, we might have to have a raise of hands, I think, to make this easier. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I declare that motion carried, so that becomes part of item number 5. Okay, back to the substantive motion, which is up there on the screen. Anyone have any comments? We're in debate now. Councillor Stellinger.
Yes, some tough decisions, but I believe this is strikes the right balance. So thank you for the amendments that have come through from various parties. I just had one further comment to make, and that was really to congratulate the officers, particularly in relation to the work on the leasing. There's been some significant anomalies there for some time, and to see those being identified and rectified in a way which, especially as it hasn't caused a great deal of consternation amongst the groups involved, is a really great achievement. So thanks.
Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate my thanks to officers. The conversations, particularly around Mangaraki Hall, I've been relatively closely involved, not with the conversations, but with the community groups, both the school and the Mangaraki Association. And while it's been a difficult decision, and it's not always been clear as to where we would end up, the process has functioned well, and it would be good to take those learnings and continue to apply them to other future decision makings. That clear communication of timelines, what needs to happen, etc., is really appreciated by the community, even when the decisions themselves are really hard.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, thank you. I too want to congratulate officers as well for some of the really good wins in here. Like we know how tricky these conversations are with community groups, and they're never easy. But I think looking at the results here is really good. Also want to speak highly of Bookable. Obviously, we can see that the numbers are providing a better financial return for this council. After the previous council decided to invest in that, as someone that's used Bookable, it's so much easier. Such a better platform, frees up officers' time. Just everything is so great about it. So yeah, really keen to see how we can keep using that wider with other community groups that have spaces they need to book as well. So thank you.
Thank you. We've had several people speak in favour of the motion. Does anyone like to speak against it? Yeah, Councillor Brown.
I'm not speaking against it, but since we've gone around and around and around, I think I should be able to talk to discussion. I think the officers have done really great work on this, and this goes back a couple of years, and I won't say it's frustrating, but we all knew this 2 years ago. This is what we signed into at the asset management plan, and everyone that's come up now has been pushed out. So, I mean, these time frames up here are absolutely fine, but at some point we are going to have to make decisions. We had a meeting at the Dowse. We all put forward things, and already we're going back on it. So, giving community time is for the new groups that may be able to raise the funds. We should absolutely be doing that, but mindfully, knowing with the asset management work that's been done, the majority of groups who have their own facilities, they are indicating that they are really struggling, and they are way ahead of these groups that are starting from ground zero. But at some point, yeah, we do have to start making decisions.
Thank you. And, I agree that these are complicated discussions in front of us today. One of the complicating factors that certainly does not apply to many of our other assets is that these were both assets gifted by the parties who came to us today and asked for it to be returned to them. I think that's, last week we made a quite quick and simple decision about closing another community facility that didn't have the same circumstances. The other part, and it has been discussed in detail today, is the clear expectations part. I think if the expectations moving forward with parties are as clear as at the beginning of the conversations as they are up on the screen today, then it makes it a very simple process to go forward, to approach a deadline and say, have these conditions been met or not, yes or no, and move forward with those decisions. So I think our officers have taken that on board for those future conversations. There are one or two which for various reasons will also be complicated, but most of them I think will be very simple. So I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. I declare that motion carried. And we will move on to item 7, the draft reserve management plan for Honiana Te Puni Reserve. It's on page 47 of the agenda. I'll ask Arthur Nelson first to speak to the item, but note too we have Kara Puketapu online. Kia ora Kara, if he's still there.
Kia ora
He's
tātou.
been paying attention for a very long time. Kia ora Kara.
Kia ora.
I'll ask Arthur to introduce this paper, but then I'll throw to you to see if you have anything to say as well. Welcome.
I'll take the report as read. This is a piece of work that will enable Honiana Te Puni to move forward with some clear structure. And on that basis, as I say, I'll take any questions.
I'll just ask Kara first if you have any introductory comments. Kara, kia ora.
Kia ora, Chair, Mayor, and councillors. Sorry, I can't turn my camera on, but that's all right. You don't need to see me. I guess just quickly, in what we're setting out here is an opportunity for us to re-envisage the management approach that we might have for Honiana Te Puni Reserve, of which is an asset to the community and has had significant investment into it by NZTA through the Te Aratupua project. I guess in contrast to the other conversations that you are having with respect of your asset management plans and existing asset portfolio, what we're looking at here is a renewed asset that has had significant Crown investment, taxpayer investment. And similarly also, it has significant cultural resonance for Taranaki whānui. Whilst it's not the pito o ne pā itself, it represents what the Crown was able to negotiate with Taranaki whānui and council as a form of return and recognition of our place, of our pito o ne pā, of which Honiana Te Puni was the paramount chief. So look, we're excited to see how we might be able to transition into a less of a we own it, you manage it relationship, and more into an active relationship of managing the site. The site itself is obviously, as I said, culturally significant and presents huge opportunity for the city as a gateway, and the reserve management plan provides us with the framework for how we might look to move forward with it. This is the first step in that pathway together, and hopefully, as signalled in the paper, we might transition into a co-management type of approach with council, and by doing that, we might be able to facilitate a governance/management framework that seeks to secure revenue through other sources and other mechanisms to ensure that we might be able to fund the maintenance and renewal requirements of the reserve in a manner that doesn't fully impose costs at 100% costs onto the ratepayers of the city. So that's the ultimate objective, one of the significant objectives of what we're trying to achieve through this. But the first step is obviously getting a reserve management plan in place, and utilising the space as a significant launch pad for pito one and into the city. And I must say the decision of council with respect of the Petone Wharf You know, there definitely could have been more conversations with iwi around that, and I think we had already signalled that actually this would have been a much better place to invest that level of capital in Pitohone, but however, council have made a decision in a different direction. But regardless of that, we will continue on with what we can try to achieve here at Honiana Te Puni Reserve, and hopefully with the support and partnership of council moving forward. So look, yeah, that's our contribution to this kaupapa, and we're hopeful that council are supportive of releasing this management plan for public consultation. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Kara. Just noting that your camera has turned on, so you've joined us in live streaming to the world. Welcome. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify the consultation. There's no mention of it under the consultation heading, but in the discussion it says, should we adopt this today, consultation will happen and the next meeting of this committee will adopt it. Is that the timeline we're looking at? That quick?
Sorry, the consultation there refers to the consultation with iwi and Taranaki Whanui. If it is agreed that this goes forward as a draft reserve management plan, we then have to consult with the public, so we have to put it out for a month, whereby we receive submissions from the public. So that's probably not quite clear in here, but that's the second bit of the consultation we're talking, and as it relates to the Reserves Act.
Yes, that's paragraph 18. Says, should the committee adopt in principle the draft plan, public consultation will be undertaken and the proposed final plan will come back to the next committee meeting. I'm asking, is it going to happen that quickly? The next committee meeting will have public consultation done, here's the final report, or will it be a bit longer?
Really depends how many submissions we get back through you, Chair. So it seems quite a tight time frame. In retrospect, but as I say, once we've gone out, we'll get a better grasp on if anybody is submitting or not for it or against it.
Thank you. I just have one question myself. It was mentioned by Kara that there are some new structures on the park already that have been funded by NZTA, the Tāwharo Pods, Waimaruno, the new sports facility down there. There are some additional ones, some sculptures and things mentioned in the plan. So who now owns those assets?
Interesting one. If they come with the NZTA, it would depend on what the arrangement was with those. I would think most of them would probably vest in council, but I may be wrong on that. To say I've not had the full detail on that as yet.
Thank you. Maybe if you could go away and let us know the answer to that one, that'd be great. Any further questions? No, in which case I will move the recommendations on page 47. I'll just ask Jenny if she can bring up on screen, because there was one additional one, which is a very standard one when we're working on quite long plans and reports like this, which delegates authority to the Chief Executive and Port Nicholson Block Settlement Trust to make any minor amendments to the reserve management plan for Honiana Te Puni Reserve. I did myself send through just a few brief comments on there that don't change the substance of it, but that's just to allow for a few minor changes to be made before it does go out to public consultation. Otherwise, we're noting the plan and agreeing that we adopt it for public consultation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Parkin. Is there any discussion? I think we're all discussed out, other than to thank you again, Kara, for the work that has gone into this plan. We look forward to working in partnership on this project. It's a very exciting plan, and already we can see on the ground that there's some great changes being made to the reserve, but a good plan for the future. So I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Ka whakapuakio, kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Thank you again, Kara. Item number 8 Drainage and play improvements, Hugh Sinclair Park, Wainoiamata, page 73 of the agenda. It's another one for Arthur Nelson, Head of Parks and Reserves, to introduce the paper. Thank you, Arthur.
Again, not too much on this one, other than to say that's through you, Chair. It's a crucial park. Not currently doing the best it possibly can at the moment because there's a number of outstanding issues. The master plan we've put together, which we brought to the previous council, provides a framework for moving forwards to make some significant improvements on that site. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I'll just kick off with one which talks about the Reserves Purchase and Development Fund, and there have, I think, been some other projects listed. Some of that fund allocated. I'm not sure about how much of that fund. Given that this is a fairly significant budget increase, does it have impacts on the funding of other projects that may have been planned for?
The funding is specific to, well, a bunch of reserves actually. Yes, it will have some impact on some of the projects, but we are bringing a report back to council with the new priorities under the reserves investment strategy, and council will obviously be able to look at that and take decisions on what it is they want to do. But yes, there is a fixed pot, reasonably flexible in how we use it with council's agreement, obviously, and we would be looking at, as I say, utilising some additional funding to do this because it is quite an important project.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? No. In that case, I will move the motions on page 73 of the agenda. There's a few of them there. I won't read them out, but could I have a seconder, please? Mayor Laban, thank you very much. Is there any discussion? No. I will put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuakio kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Item number 9 is a 6-monthly biodiversity update. Arthur remains in the hot seat. He's been here all day. Arthur, over to you.
Sorry, again, I'll just take the report as being read, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions on this 6-monthly update? There's a lot in there. I just had one, Arthur, about the prospect of a deer fence. Currently, we spend a lot of money annually controlling deer. Is the idea of a deer fence that after we've paid for a fence and presumably cleared out deer inside the fence, that it will reduce that annual cost ongoing?
The anticipation is that the deer fence will allow us to concentrate our efforts far more precisely. So we'd hopefully get a much better rate on deer control than we've currently got. Whether that will lead to ultimate savings, not too sure at this stage. It might just mean that we end up doing more with the budget.
Thank you. And just speaking of the budget, you reminded me of one other question I had, which was that there's a budget in this paper. It doesn't specify what period it's for. This is a 6-month update. Is the budget on page 110 for the first 6 months of this financial year?
That's an annual budget, so it will be the 6 months we're already done, plus the remaining of this year.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? No, I can't see any hands. In that case, I will move the motion on page 98 that the committee receives and notes the report and notes the projects detailed in this report, which could potentially be funded through the Reserves Investment Strategy funding, which Council will review as part of its long-term plan. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Is there any discussion? No, I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, say no. Ka whakapuakio kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Thank you, Arthur. You've done your bit for our city. I'll now invite Miriam Randall, Senior Advisor, Climate and Sustainability, and Ewan Schertzer, Head of Climate Waste and Resource Recovery, to speak to item 10, the update on Council's climate change work. It's on page 122 of the agenda.
Kia ora. So by way of introduction for this paper, I just wanted to give a little bit of an update. The climate update covers a few different topics within it, but the first within that paper is an update on our climate emissions inventory. Unfortunately, we have found an error within the report, and we were unable to correct it before this agenda was published. And so I just want to talk you through the details of that, so you're up to date and we can circulate that information wider. So specifically, the error that was found was within the open landfill emissions. So it's just that one number, the open landfill emissions. And what that has meant is that on the first graph, the first figure within the, what is it? Figure one, you'll see the open landfill emissions were accounted to be roughly 32,000 tonnes. And the updated figure for that is actually 28,012 tonnes. So it's actually a reduction of roughly 4,500 tonnes. And the sort of filter through of that number change has meant that our Scope 1 emissions that are noted on the second figure, third figure in the report, are going from 59,000 tonnes roughly to about 54,000 tonnes. And this has also affected our total carbon footprint for the report, which has gone from 18,000 tonnes down to 13,000 tonnes, or 13,000 tonnes 583. So those numbers are being corrected in our carbon inventory report, which is going to be published again on our website. Currently, in the committee paper that you received, there's a link to that emissions inventory, but we've removed that just right now because we know it's not accurate, and that will be that's in the process of being updated right now. And we have an updated version of the wording in your committee paper, which can be circulated with you as well, just to kind of correct that. In addition to that update, I just wanted to also acknowledge within the report, overall we're making good progress, particularly on our two interim targets around the reduction of energy emissions and the reduction of fleet emissions. So our fleet is now 92% electric, which is a substantial reduction over the last few years of effort. And also the emissions from gas in our facilities is reducing well. So the most recent project being the Huia project, which is now off gas, and the Huia pool is due to open shortly, I believe in early March. And on average, that's taken from our 2018-2019 emissions. It's roughly a 59% reduction from the gas emissions in that year to what we are having in our emissions footprint this year. So there's some really great progress happening in those particular spaces. The other thing I wanted to acknowledge in the carbon inventory is that our Scope 3 emissions, particularly our contractor emissions, that might have stood out for you in the report, that they look like they have grown a lot this year because we have adopted a new methodology for how we calculate and report on those emissions. The new methodology, as is explained in the report, is enabling us to capture all of the contractor spend, excuse me, which we previously were unable to do for figures lower than 250,000. So although it may look like a large increase in emissions, it's actually more of an accurate reflection of an ability for us to understand what that footprint really is looking like. And by way of trying to explain that, we have backdated the last 3 years worth of Scope 3 emissions in that space to kind of demonstrate that it's not just a one-year change, that there is this those emissions have existed in the past. We just now have a better way of calculating and reporting on them. I think I'll take the rest of the report as read and am happy to take questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Young, Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, thank you very much for a thorough report. Just going to go to page 128, item number 28. Naturally going to talk about Te Ara Whakamua as someone who's previously been involved, as a couple of others around the table have as well. And just really mindful of one of the concerns that was raised early stages of that process was, are we doing this process again? In the sense that every 5 to 10 years, council seems to kind of kickstart another process that talks about city emissions as a whole or as a collective. And I guess I'm kind of wrestling with, is there anything that we're mindful of or considering to prevent us from having to go through yet another community process that's talking about climate change and climate action in, say, 5, 10 years' time again?
This particular item is just providing an update on that the group decided to, effectively cease to operate. But that doesn't mean that the action pathway isn't continuing to be in place. So that action itself hasn't made a change to those existence of those plans and those actions within it. What I would say though is that, and I'm not sure if that exactly answers your question, but I would expect that over time we will have to increasingly adapt the plan, and there may be a point where we have to redevelop a new plan because time has moved on. And just looking at, say, energy and fleet emissions, at some point in the not so distant future, effectively most of those emissions will have been eliminated. But of course, there is a number of other emission sources that continue to be, they're no longer the low-hanging fruit. They're the very sticky ones that you just find very difficult to pick. So I would say that effort will probably need to refocus on those areas, and that may at some point mean that those plans actually need to be perhaps developed as new plans. One thing I would say about the Lower Hutt Climate Action Pathway, though, when you look at that, and unfortunately it's not in here, but for those that are familiar with it, there is a big one-page spread that shows the various actions that ultimately need to happen across the city. I've looked at it time and time again. They actually are the same actions. They haven't really, the challenge hasn't really changed. It's all about, we need to get out of fossil fuels and electrify. So those types of actions are actually very consistent. We're more limited in terms of what council can achieve, and ultimately it's reliant on the whole city as a whole tackling those.
Councillor Parkin, you had a question as well?
Kia ora. Yeah, just looking at the change between Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions, is there likely to be a Scope 4? Are there any other blind spots that we're currently not seeing? I'm aware that the landfill emissions are estimated, and until we can get accurate numbers on that, there's always that potential for change, but just wondering if there's anything else.
I can confirm there's no Scope 4. So there is Scope 1, 2, and 3, and they haven't really changed. What has changed in the last year or two is that the way to estimate some of those emissions, we've changed the methodology, whereas previously we've basically tried to get emissions data from contractors, particularly the large ones, but you can't actually, that's technically not feasible for all the suppliers that we have because there's literally several thousand of them. So we've changed the methodology down to a dollar spend approach. Now, that doesn't mean it's got ultimate accuracy because you're applying kind of industry-wide emission factors, but it certainly gives you an order of magnitude of, it's one of the major emission sources, and that really is confirmed now. How do we improve that data? Well, that's an ongoing challenge. And how do we reduce the emissions? It's actually working with those contractors, particularly the big ones. So I don't think there's any blind spots in the sense that we've missed emission sources. Are they accurate down to the last ton? Probably not, because we're inherently relying on methodologies that are don't have that accuracy, right? And the same applies to the landfill. The landfill, ultimately, no one's standing there with a meter and saying, well, this is how many emissions are coming out of the landfill. What we can measure is how much gas is being extracted, and then that is compared against a modeled amount of emissions that, based on accepted models, is emitted from the landfill, and basically we're looking at the difference. Unfortunately, none of those things are perfect, but that doesn't change the order of magnitude of why we need to look at waste reductions and the actions we are doing under the Waste Management and Minimisation Plan, for example, to tackle those.
Any further questions? I just had one, which was to do with the funding. Paragraph 26 notes that the funding criteria, funding envelope and funding mechanism remain largely the same as outlined and agreed back in 2023. Certainly happy for that to apply to the next round, but will there be an opportunity sometime soon to review particularly the criteria I'm thinking of, but review the conditions of the fund? That's part of the wider review.
Yeah, so there's kind of been a staged approach to reviewing all of council's funds and grants. And the initial stage was this decision-making assessment around how do all of the funds get decision-making approved. And so this is the change that we've talked about so far, is the new panel, decision-making panel for funds. The second part to that work that Adrian Moore is leading, is around what funds do we have, do they overlap, is there an opportunity to align or improve the way that we run funds so that there is more efficiency, that, you know, that we can get the right amount of money out to the right amount of organisations. And so that work is yet to be undertaken. And so, yes, I think that will be part of that process. I don't have a date as to when that's going to happen.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? If not, I will move the recommendations on page 122 of the agenda. Mawai e tautoko, do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jung. Is there any discussion? No, I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapuaki au kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 11, Emergency Management 6-month update. It's on page 130 of the agenda. I'll invite Anthony Robinson, our Emergency Management Lead, to speak to the item. Kia ora, Anthony.
Kia ora. As you've indicated, I'm the Emergency Management Lead here at Hutt City Council, and I take the report as read. The report focuses on our responses last year. That there was a couple of them that required council to lead emergency management coordination across our TA. And more recently, CLT has considered how might we respond to a landslip scenario similar to that unfortunately occurred in Mount Maunganui. Also, although outside of the period of the report, in the last 2 weeks, we've had a significant storm that required response. I'd say in all these cases, council's emergency management systems operated well, but of course there's always scope for improvement. Happy to take questions that you might have.
Any questions, folks? Councillor Stellinger?
Yes, just one, thanks. Just looking to ensure I've got a correct understanding. On page 132, we've got table 1, which talks about the people. It's great to hear that we've got enough trained staff for 4 rotating shifts. That seems like a great spot to be in. But my question surrounds the function course completion. So does that mean of those trained staff, the average completion of courses which we'd like to see done is 32%? Have I got that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. What we've had is an issue with the ability to deliver courses. So a couple of years ago, councils across the region approved an increase in funding to Remo, who provides that training. They have now recruited a workforce in the process of completing their onboarding. That workforce will be able to deliver those function courses at a much more significant rate. So I would expect that would improve over the next 6 months.
Mayor Laban.
Thanks, Anthony. Just sort of endorsing what Tony said regarding the staff on the night of the storm and all of those that worked through the night, including yourself, and the great job that everybody did to keep our community as safe as possible, and also acknowledging the work that many in the community, including a lot sitting around this table, did to help with the cleanup as well. My understanding is that was the 9th event this year, and the indications are that 2026 represents significant risk for us in terms of climate change and inclement weather. Is that true?
So in calendar year 2025, there were 11 events that, weather events that received either an orange or a red warning. So there were 2 reds and 9 oranges. We responded to both the red ones. This year, the most recent event was a orange warning, which required a full activation of the EOC. The director for NEMA had an interview with Radio New Zealand the other day, and he indicated that this year there'd be more states of local emergency and emergency mobile alerts issued across the Motu than for the entirety of last year. Most of those came in February. So yeah, it's fair to say that we are seeing an uptick in event intensity and corresponding response by councils across the country.
Therefore, that 32% that Councillor Stellinger alluded to, is that something we need to address with some urgency?
It is. So we're looking at how we uplift those numbers. Fortunately, we have a pretty solid core of function managers and staff that are available. Most of these severe weather events are relatively short in duration, so we're able to manage those effectively. But we wish to bring the numbers up because one day we will have a Cyclone Gabriel type event. That's what we have forecast in our strategy for the next 10 years. It's been the most likely event that we need to prepare for. And that's a complex, long duration response and recovery.
Councillor Shaw.
Thanks for the report, Anthony, and really good to see that there's going to be some lessons learned out of what happened with Mount Maunganui. I mean, when that happened, I thought immediately, what if it was us? A tragic event. Anyway, on page 133, you make reference to a visit to Wainuiomata Marae to discuss their role and services in emergency management. Was that same courtesy extended to other marae as well?
Yes, so we've had a number of visits, unfortunately not to all marae. Our engagement with marae is coloured by some history with Remo and former councils and the like. And it's been difficult to make inroads. Our Te Tira Māori team, especially with the most recent event, has recognised that we need to do more in that space and is undertaken to help facilitate engagement there. That said, for the last 3 severe weather events that we've had, we have engaged with marae about the provision of emergency shelter, and that offer's always been forthcoming. And we do routinely provide early warning of severe weather events or heavy swells to marae that are most exposed to those risks in Wainuiomata, Waifatu and Kokiri.
Thank you, Anthony. Just a quick couple of questions from me. Firstly, you talked about lessons we could learn about how we would respond to a tragedy like what happened in Mount Maunganui. Have we also taken a look at what we can do preemptively to prevent that even happening? Have we looked had another look at our own community facilities and things operating on council land and looked at the hazards again and made sure that we have appropriate plans and actions in place?
I can probably talk to that one. Straight after the Mount Maunganui event, CLT did a run through of what would have happened if that had been us. Starting from 3 days earlier, looking ahead at the weather, what would we have done to get ready and to prepare, and would we have looked at where some of the issues had been raised around that event and making sure that we were going to be sound in those areas and we were comfortable with where we came through. As a result of that too, though, we are checking in on a number of different facilities, including our own campground, which is not council operated, but is on council land, but to make sure that other people have business continuity plans that include that kind of event.
Thank you. And the other thing, the report mentions that debriefs had been held to identify practices that could be improved. Is there an opportunity for elected members to give some feedback on particularly the recent events and improvements that they might have identified as well?
Absolutely. We can consider that as part of our future protocols.
And they should just email you through in the first instance. Thank you. Any further questions, folks? No. In that case, I will move the motions on page 130 of the agenda. Mawai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Dyer. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councillor Stellinger.
Yes, I do want to take the opportunity here just to thank the team for their response. I have a lot of confidence in just what I observed from pretty much a distance as to how that was handled, and from the professionalism I see coming from our emergency management group. I think we have a responsibility as an elected members group, given what we've heard about likely events, frequency and so on. And just for that reason, I just would mention this, that while it's great to hear we have improved training capability, my recollection of times long ago was that it's quite difficult for staff to free themselves up to get on courses. And frequently staff would pull out last minute, urgent things would pop up and so on. And we know over the next 12 months and beyond, we've got a lot of deadline set big changes coming up that our staff will be pretty busy, if not very busy, dealing with. So I just would ask that if we're really struggling to up those numbers and for staff to find time for the courses, that we get alerted on a more timely basis than the next 6 months, because I think we'd have a responsibility to enter into discussions with our exec team as what we can do, just to minimise our chances of being less prepared than we could be when those events start ramping up.
Any other comments? Just to make one on behalf of all elected members to you, Anthony, to thanks to you and the team and all of the great volunteers who were activated through that last storm event in particular. I know I've seen online our community really appreciated the actions and the communication from our council. So I will now put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Ka whakapua ki au kua mana te motini. I declare that motion carried. Item 12 is a recommendation from the Age and Accessibility Subcommittee meeting of 24th February 2026 to establish an Age and Accessibility Advisory Group. There's some information on page 135 of your agendas, and there is a supplementary printout there of some information from that subcommittee's agenda, which is referred to in the recommendation. But I'm going to hand over to Councillor Barrett to speak to the recommendations in front of us today.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, the Aged and Accessibility Committee has been set up to hear the voices of our least heard members of the community, and often the most vulnerable. At our inaugural meeting recently, the committee and speakers learnt that Council has a data list of groups they already approach when some issues come up. Hence the recommendation that we, set up an advisory group. We note that the quickest way to get the issues out to people is by resourcing the avenues already in existence. And for this reason, recommendation is that we form the group of up to 8 members from across the diverse aspects of the city that will help us to get the information we need to have a more accessible city. I guess we've been listening to a lot of things this morning, and none more so has resonated with me than the previous one that we've just been talking about, especially about climate change. There is a lot of vulnerable people in our city that have no one, that have no way of, reaching out or feel scared to reach out to people. If a climate change is going to occur, where do they go? What do they do? What do they need in their houses, etc. This is an avenue that the advisory group could be working on, to be helping to set up a database of those people in our city who are on their own, who we can contact very quickly if need to advise them of something that is happening. Councillor Parkin, the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and I spoke to Grey Power recently, who support us fully and are excited that the council is showing the initiative to be able to have this group in force, and that we can be reaching more people out there in the city. There've been no financial resources allocated to setting up the advisory group, apart from officer and councillor time, which I am very, very supportive of. So that's it. I would like to recommend that the recommendation that the subcommittee recommends that the committee agrees to the establishment of the advisory group and the proposed process to appoint members to the group as outlined in paragraphs 19 to 21 of the officer's report be accepted, please.
Thank you for the work of the subcommittee, and glad to hear it's already being well received in the advisory group around our city. Just noting this is a recommendation that comes up from the subcommittee to this committee. So my recommendation is that the committee agrees to the establishment of the advisory group and so on as outlined in the recommendation there. Thank you for your recommendation. Happy to recommend that our committee agrees to those terms. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Stallinger, thank you very much. Would anyone like to make any comments? Councillor Parkin, Councillor Young.
Kia ora. Thank you. I really appreciate the fact that we are setting up this committee. One of the things that was mentioned under public comment, and Councillor Barrett and I disagree on, is the potential need for funding to support particularly the advisory group. And it was made by a member of the public, and the comment was from a group that she was representing. My apologies, my brain's gone sideways and I can't remember which group it was, but their request was for the work and expertise of those, particularly with a disability, who are bringing that viewpoint to represent that part of the community, to be recognised, and acknowledging the fact that if we don't do that, we are actually opening ourselves up to not have a process that works as effectively as possible. So I totally support the recommendations, but I do note my reservation that actually we may need to look at funding this at some point.
Just want to follow up on that, because I guess that was something that I also picked up as I attended that hui, which was wonderfully hosted at Te Kākano Marae Mawera. And I was just really mindful of sometimes it is worth, I do think there is a question around whether or not we invest in this well, because I think if we want to make sure it's set up well, we need to honour people and their time. And I'm recognising there's a lot of big conversations to start off with in particular, and that public comment, there was a whole list of things actually that she rattled off that I thought was actually really good input, but particularly that, and just really mindful around, even if we just took the cabinet fees framework, just had a brief conversation with Councillor Barrett about how often would those meetings be, which was potentially quarterly. And I was doing the math on that of 8 members. So, 230 times 8 members is 1,840, times that by 4, 7,360, times that by 3 if you want to for the triennium. And I actually still think that's quite a small investment to make sure something that we think is really important is set up really well. So I'm just, I I guess echoing what Councillor Parkin has just raised in terms of how we honouring people in that space, whether that be ensuring that at least their costs are covered to attend. Should, like for me, I think it's a bit of a baseline. So, kia ora.
Go to Councillor Barrett next and then Councillor Tonga Grant.
Just maybe we let Councillor Tonga Grant speak first, because I would like to have a right of reply to that, please.
Oh, thank you. I have just been having some thought about if we do have this accessibility advisory group, is that then we would open the door for other groups who feel marginalised to then come forward and say, we also want to have this opportunity as well. We feel like we're not being heard. We already have a councillor whose job is to work with the age and accessibility communities, as we do other officers who support other communities or groups that feel marginalised as well. And so for me is, do we then move this to become, do we have advisory groups for all the different sectors of our community who feel marginalised or like they're not being heard or have different needs? And on top of that, if we are going to be putting money to this, then we also pay all the other groups or people who, you know, it's one of those things where if we're going to do it for one group, we need to do it for all of the other groups, and being mindful of actually being able to have our voices heard at this table and decisions being made with the information given should be part of the way that we acknowledge their input, is actually doing something with the information given to us rather than, we'll pay you to come and give us your voices, but we're not going to do anything with it. Yeah, those are just kind of some of my thoughts at the minute, but thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. So at our inaugural meeting, when I think it was Andrea spoke, and she said, officer stated at the time there was no funding. This is a new concept. Well, it's a relatively new concept because we have had an aged and accessibility. We have an accessibility and disability committee in the past. It has been noted that we do need this committee and we do need this advisory group. We do not have any funding at present. We're all trying to cut corners here, there and everywhere. So that is not to say that it could not happen in the future. We need to see how it's going. We need to see that we're getting the best advice out there as possible. So, you know, I'm not trying to be a sour grape here. I do realise that, you know, there are a lot of people that need to get here under their own funding, under their own steam. But right now we just don't have that money. So we need to accept them for who they are, and we need to say we're going to listen to their voice, all their voices, from whatever group they come from. But right now, we just don't have the money to pay them to get here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Ka whakapua ki au kua mana te motini. I declare that motion carried. The final item on our agenda is an information item, the Connected Communities Climate and Resilience Committee Forward Programme 2026. It's on page 158 of the agenda. However, there is a revised version in front of you, which is what we are looking at today. Andrea, do you have any introductory comments on that?
Yes, this is an updated work programme which we've discussed with the committee chair and deputy. You'll notice there's a lot coming up. There's a lot coming up. Also, a number of those papers are from the Parks and Reserves team. We will just have to reassess their ability to deliver those. They've been very involved in the storm recovery, and so they've had to completely divert their work programme to storm recovery for a couple of weeks now. And we also have additionally today added ongoing divestment conversations and a new divestment conversation. So we will reassess what can be delivered in the next in the next round, and if there are any changes, we'll let you know.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about the work program? No, if not, I will move that the forward program for 2026, this amended version, be received and noted. Mā wai e tautoko. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Tonga Grant, thank you. I will now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Ka whakapua ki au, kua mana te mōtini. I declare that motion carried. Item number 14 is questions, and I have received no questions. So we'll move on to what it says here as item number 17, closing formalities, the karakia whakamutunga. Me karakia tātou. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia I te uru tapunui, kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te arataka tū. Koia rā e rongo, whakaerehea āki ki runga, kia wātia, aira, kua wātia, hau pai mā rere. I declare this meeting closed at 12:43 p.m.